So based on the last video, I took a pods approach to making relationships between listing items. And I've ran into some problems with that approach when I had to come down to taking taxonomy and doing parenting data. So if you have a main category, having a subcategory, and then having that data display back to a template in an easy way was really getting lost with the last setup. So essentially what I've done here is rewrote it to still use pods, except cut out the subcategory pod as seen in the last post and just go with one top level taxonomy. And this works out real well because WordPress can natively handle a parent-child relationship in a taxonomy easily. And the other advantage you get of that too is when you start parenting things like that, you can start to use its native templating system in order to display a page full of that categorical data, as seen here. So that's the top level, and then you can drill down right into activities, music, and these are all pod level data. It's all pod stuff. So essentially I rewrote the script a bit, and what it's going to do is take the spreadsheet, import it, and create all the pods and categories of it in one sweep. So I'm just going to run that real quick so we can take a look at it. This is a system with data in it. First I'm going to knock all the data out of it. So here's our database, here's all of our tables, straight up drop them. Yes. So that'll give us essentially WordPress from scratch. Welcome to WordPress. See? So we're going to reload it by importing. I have my backup file right here. And had it right here. Let's unzip it again. There it is. Right. So we're going to import this file right there. This is going to refresh the WordPress installation back to essentially scratch. And by scratch, I mean a state in which my pods are set up and I'm ready to start doing this database work. So we'll take a look here. We'll go into the dashboard. And what you're going to see is when we go under the AB listings here, there's going to be no listings in the system. There'll be no categories in the system. So this script, and I can post this later, is pretty good at handling all sorts of cases. I ran into a lot of problems where duplicate entries would stop the script or would cause category problems. There's a lot of, when you're dealing with categories and subcategories, there's a lot of small considerations to pick up, having to do with making sure your data comes in sanitized correctly, you're trimming off white spaces, you're making everything lowercase, so you don't create duplicate categories. And all that gets done basically in this block right here. There's a little bit of handling too. When WordPress throws an error, for example, if a category already exists, it'll return a WP error object. If it creates a category, it returns an array, so there's some type checking you have to do. There's a lot of subtle stuff, but it's all essentially in there. So to run the script, this is associated to just a page, so I'm going to run the page, which essentially runs the script. And we're going to turn all the spreadsheet data here into WordPress content data. So to do that, on my site, I just go right to the page that's associated with this template, and I hit enter. And what you're going to see is this thing's going to start to run. And this little piece is going to go around. It's going to do about 1,700 records. So I'm going to pause the video real quick while it spins, and we'll pick it back up once the import's finished. And we're back. His numbers changed slightly. Script's finished running. And so we're going to come right back here and reload this listing page. And what we're going to see is that it's now created all my records from the spreadsheet in WordPress. And it's done it in such a way that it's maintained the pod categorical data down here. Any instance of a row that had website or phone or email, for example, gets inserted into those pods, that pod metadata. And more importantly, over here where taxonomy data for category is displayed, it's looking at each row and it's associating its main category and it's associating its subcategory automatically, which saves tremendous amounts of time with this import. And we'll come over here and look at the AB listing categories. You can see that these are, anything with a dash in front of it is a child of a parent. This is all taxonomy data. You can see the listings have been imported correctly. We can even sort that to look at what's the most popular, like the tag cloud shows pretty well. All this data is in here, looking really good. And then one of my favorite parts of this is that when you go to view any of the categories, when it renders the taxonomy template, all that work's already done. So when a user goes to the site and they want to look at arts and crafts, or they want to look at a main category's subcategory, WordPress has already provided the templates for rendering that data. So now I just have to go in and tweak the appearance of it the way I need it to be. So a tremendous amount of work has been done using this import script. What's nice about this script too is if I rerun this, it's going to look at each record. It's going to look at each row and determine if it's already created in the database. And if it is, it's going to skip it. So you can see this script is already finished running because there's nothing new to enter, which is very good. The first couple versions of this thing didn't handle that case so well. It would create all sorts of records. So that's the quick synopsis of it. And this script is it's essentially a CSV importer script. Getting the right CSV importer is important. A lot of code out there that you can grab off of php.net doesn't handle every single case correctly. I'm on a Mac, so there's some line termination stuff you gotta watch out for. And sometimes some of the scripts don't handle single quotes, double quotes, basically things PHP can get stuck on. This particular thing is very robust. This parse CSV function I got here works well. There's a scrub function in here which essentially cleans the data. I mentioned with the categories coming in, especially on hand-entered records, sometimes people will put an extra space at the end of something. They'll capitalize here, they won't capitalize there. WordPress is very literal with all that. It'll create categories for each iteration, so it's good to trim the data, lowercase the data, and if you want to run any more sanitization scripts for it, that's a good function. And then there's some more private functions essentially that handle the descriptions are across 3 columns on the spreadsheet. It consolidates it. The add check is a function to determine if the records legitimately can be added if it has a name, or if it's missing data, it won't add it. And then most of the heavy lifting here has to do with solving for categories. I'd say that's probably the most interesting piece of this code. And then the rest, the add AB listing function here, that essentially, I'd call that almost a controller the way it works, because a lot of the logic's baked into it. It'll create a field array that you pass to the pods, what do they call it? The pods add method. And then that configures the array you need it. And then I've also got right down here the taxonomy association calls to these functions up here. So I've kind of abstracted them out a bit to make them more modular because I've had to tweak them a bit. So it's good to go with like a controller format for this kind of thing. And then down here, this is cranking up my system saying, let this thing run with a ton of RAM, let it run as long as it needs to, because it's a big import. Essentially, this is going to go on shared hosting somewhere when it's done. So it may be a little bit of an issue to do a big import. So I've coded one feature into this add AB listing that's kind of handy, just like the other file, just like the other screencasts on this topic with the start at index. So essentially, if you pass it an index value of 500, if it ended at 500 on import, it'll start at 500. And it just arrays slices. It'll take all the data, cut it, and then start 500 in, for example. That's essentially the gist of it. And yeah, that's all there was. So hopefully that's helpful. If you want any of this code, just hit me up in the comments, in the discuss box. It's all in a private repo, but I don't mind sharing it if you need something in particular. Thanks.